We're now moving
But
to.
there were two councillors, Martin.
We're now moving to DCS 100/15. Proposed councillors, I'd like your attention for just a few minutes. I'm going to have a break in a couple of minutes. DCS 100/15, proposed discontinuance and sale of right-of-way adjoining 91 South Street, Hadfield. Do I have a mover of the motion in the report? Councillor Yildiz. A seconder, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Yildiz, would you wish to speak to it? Councillor Davidson, would you wish to speak to it?
Which number was it again? Sorry.
Number 7.
Page 121.
115.
Hadfield, sale of right-of-way.
Just the D&D number is all I want to do.
DCS 100.
Councillor Davidson.
So just to say, this is an access road that hasn't been used, and we're proposing that it be sold at market value. So to enable the person who's going to potentially purchase it to demolish the existing building and do whatever plans he intends to with that acquired piece of land which hasn't been in use.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Kavanagh wanted to speak. Councillor Bolton after that.
I'm actually going to speak against the motion.
Okay.
Okay, only because I was involved when the Virginia Street Aged Care Facility was being planned, and I actually think that I remember at the time, and you might remember from the UPC members, I questioned the objector because we were trying to get him to buy a property on the South Street to get access out that way, because the Virginia Street is a very narrow street with a lot of traffic coming in. And I actually think that to pass off this land to the adjoining property owner is a little bit of an error in the possibility of access from out of that facility. So I understand, I was disappointed with him at the time that the property wasn't purchased on facing South Street. And I remember at the UPC, he claimed that they had asked all the property owners to try and, to purchase one. But then one went for sale about 3 weeks after the permit went up, which was... But anyway, even in spite of that, I still think that this could potentially be a valuable piece of land for access for the, particularly disability access and whatever, to get out of the site in emergency. So I'm just... I know at the moment it isn't in that condition to be used, but I'm just a bit cautious about selling this piece of land.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Bolton.
I'm really strongly against this because if it hasn't been accessed, I mean, that's probably because the person next door whacked up a fence so no one could access it. In fact, two bits of the report I think are rather disturbing, that basically it legitimises, the wording of it, furthermore, the current owner of 91 South Street contends that he, together with various owners, have exclusively occupied the road for a sufficient period of time to claim the land via an adverse possession claim. Now, by rights, we should be taking action against him for actually taking over public land. That's how I read it. Then there's another bit further on in the report that council will acknowledge and give preferential allocation rights to a person who can demonstrate continuous exclusive occupation of the land. I just think it's outrageous that that's the basis of selling off a bit of land. And just in the previous item, or a couple of items ago, when we were talking about the Saxon Street hub, we've just finally acquiring a road that the council many years ago thought they no longer needed and sold off to the church, which we later discovered we needed for access to this Saxon Street community hub. I'm dead against it, and also I'm opposed to this basis that someone can just whack up a fence and claim public land as private property. I just think that's so outrageous.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Thompson, do you speak to this? No, you haven't spoken to this. You may speak.
I'm in furious agreement with Councillor Bolton on this particular one, which is...
We're going to pause for applause. Proceed, Councillor Thompson.
the two Conservatives here are in agreement with Councillor Bolton. I too am somewhat surprised that they're talking about adverse possession, because my understanding was that it hasn't been that long, and I could be corrected on that. My concern, like Councillor Kavanagh's, is that we just cannot see forward in this particular, into the future in this particular precinct. Whilst the private developer that does own the the aged care facility at the rear of this is talking about expansion. But there is an opportunity there that he may require this, and it's great to see you here, Nick, because I know that we've been in disagreement on certain sales of publicly owned land where it's been stripped down the side where it has had no effect. This one could have grave effect if we were to sell it off. The opportunity for us to actually open this up, if needed, will be left there for us if we do not sell it. The ability for us just to be able to go and open it up and start using it could be there. If I'm wrong with the adverse possession of the site, then please pull me up on that, directors and CEOs. But I just don't feel that the small amount of money we make from this would warrant it in this particular occasion. I do, however, think that we should have sold that park off given the opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'm going to ask the CEO to talk a little bit about the adverse possession questions that have been asked, and I also would like to foreshadow perhaps a procedural motion that we defer this item, but I'll ask the CEO to respond first.
Just through the Mayor, and this is really just by way of information. So the proportion of the right-of-way that has adverse possession possessory rights, what adverse possession means is that the applicant can apply to the Titles Office directly and have granted that piece of land because they can show their possessory rights. So it's to do with adverse possession law, and really, what the officers are saying in this report is because that person has accumulated those rights, and whether action should have been taken 15 or 20 years ago when that started to accumulate is a different question. So I'm not arguing that case. I'm just letting you know that because they have accumulated those rights on a proportion of that land, it does leave the way open for an adverse possession claim, which would be highly likely to be or could be successful. So
thank you very much.
Can I just ask a further question?
Yes,
is that 100% of that particular site, or is it a small portion?
it's a proportion.
What is the portion?
Yeah, I might go to the Director of Corporate Service. That's okay, that's fine. Yeah, I think that's on.
Through the Mayor. Through the Mayor. You'll be aware that there's a gate across the parcel of land. The area behind the gate is subject to the possessory rights, because to have those possessory rights you need to enclose the land. So there's a portion from the road through to the gate that wouldn't have those.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Yes, final question, Councillor Thompson.
Does that mean that it cannot be used either as a walkway or any future access as a result of the way it's been adversely possessed?
If it was that adversely possessed, that portion of the land would become someone else's land.
But it cannot now be used as a through in any way?
Not unless we got agreement from the person that has those rights.
I'd like to move.
I was going to foreshadow that if the motion is unsuccessful, I'll move an alternative recommendation, which is that Council resolves that having considered the submissions received, etc., it is of the opinion that the road is reasonably required as a road for public use and determines not to sell the land, and then renumber point 6 to point 2.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. I'm going to move a procedural motion that we defer this item.
Yes, please.
All those in favour?
Yes, please.
All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We don't often speak to procedural motions, but hopefully for the sake of the audience, just in terms of some context there, it will give us a chance to explore some of the questions that have been asked. But thank you for the debate.
Recess?
Yes, like an adjournment for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I'd like all those in favour of a 10-minute adjournment. All those against? I declare that carried. See you back here at 9:30, councillors.
I could keep going.
Meeting. Could I have a motion to resume the meeting? Councillor Kavanagh, seconded. Councillor Lenker-Thompson. All those in favour?
Yeah, with the copies.
All those
Yeah, no problem,
against? I declare that carried and the meeting open.
Can I move that we discuss the upfield shared path? It's just that Spiros is waiting here.
So we'll move that up the agenda. I'm just going to do one thing procedurally, which was remiss of me. Apologies. Just in terms of the petitions that were tabled earlier in the night, just failed to get a mover and seconder. Could I get a mover for the petitions that were tabled earlier in the night? Councillor Kavanagh, seconded by Councillor Davidson. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you,
No, I mean,
councillors.
just about the petitions.
Yes.
I remember when it was being listed on it said about toilets in Coburg, but it was actually toilets in
Faulkner.
Reserve.
Oh, sorry,
in
Stephen.
Faulkner.
Yeah, in Faulkner.
And it
Well,
wasn't
there
in
was
Coburg.
one for Faulkner and one for
Oh, there was
Coburg.
one for Coburg too.
I
was there?
passed
We
one
will,
up for
we will check
Coburg.
it, we will check it with the,
Yeah,
with
can you
the
actually
wording
suppose
on the
it gets into
petitions.
different- okay.
We'll make sure that it corresponds. Oh, we're back live now with the microphones as well. So we had a proposal to move up DCI 5315, which is the upfield shared path north of Bell Street. Do I have a mover of a motion? Councillor Bolton, you'd like to move the motion and report?
Yeah.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to speak to it, Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I would like to speak to it, and I'd certainly like to thank the council officers for producing this report, which stemmed from a motion I moved, I don't know, a couple of months ago. I mean, the basis of the recommendations are recommendations that come from an audit done by the Moreland Bicycle Users Group. And, you know, because initially, in response to the cycling safety issues in Brunswick, the initial audit done by the council only went as far as Bell Street, and there are clearly some dangerous areas north of Bell Street. I mean, I'd like even more things done than are recommended in this report, but I feel that this is a good start, and also the reference to the missing link between where the upfield bike path ends and the Western Ring Road is also good to see that back, because certainly at council level we haven't talked about the missing link in the bike path for the last year or two. In my first year on council we had discussion about it, but the last year or two we haven't been talking about it, and I strongly feel that for us to actually get this up and running, we will need some strong community agitation around this, especially in terms of trying to get the state government to cough up some money for this in addition to council. I think we do need to do, and certainly I'd call on Moreland Bicycle Users Group and other groups to consider ways that we can increase the public profile of this, because I think a lot of people in the southern part of Moreland aren't aware that there is a missing link in the bike path. So I think we need to do, work out a bit of a plan to try and agitate for that. And I do appreciate that some efforts will be made in terms of improving lighting on this section of the bike path. I think only a small amount is being proposed in this report, and hopefully in the future we'll get a lot more, because I think it is, with fewer businesses and so forth around in this neck of the woods, I think it is very, very dark on the upfield bike path at night, and certainly there are a number of hazards.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kavanagh, do you wish to add anything
just
further?
to reiterate Councillor Bolton's words, and just one question for the officers. With the numbers, I was getting a bit confused. Where are we with the Cumberland Road project? Yeah, where are we with Cumberland Road? I couldn't quite... I see we've got specific mention for the upfield, but I'm just wondering about Cumberland Road.
We're working with Vic Roads on the design. It's a Vic Roads road, obviously, about how we can effectively share the space with it. So we're continuing to progress with Vic Roads. I don't have a definitive date of when it will go in or won't go in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers to this amendment, motion for or against? No? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. And thank you to members of the gallery who remain to see the resolution of that item and for your advocacy on it. We'll now move back to the start of the agenda and go through the items that we haven't covered already. So we're going back to DCS 9515, Assembly of Councillors record. Do I have a mover for the report recommendation? Councillor Rob Thompson, seconded by Councillor Oscar Yildiz. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Thompson? Councillor Yildiz? No. Any further debate? Councillor Kavanagh.
I just want to say, I think, and I won't do it tonight, but I'm foreshadowing that the next meeting or something, I'm going to move a motion that not only do we record the attendance, but the time of arrival and departures of people at meetings. because people are attending for a third of the meeting or half the meeting, and I think it should be listed very clearly as to what time, not when people go to the toilet, of course, and they come back to the meeting, but what time they start the meeting, what time they leave the meeting, because I think it's, I think that's something that we can add to it.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there any further debate on the Assembly of Councillors record? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We're moving now to item DCS 9615, Council Meeting Schedule 2016. I do have an alternative resolution to that that's in the report, and I'd like to move that.
I'm happy to move it with your alternative.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Thompson.
No, like you.
I don't, as presented and circulated with the amended resolution.
It's probably worth reading it out, Councillor Thompson.
I will read it out then. To conduct, the council resolves to conduct 3 all-council meetings in 2016, 1 each in Glenroy, Fawkner and Brunswick. But the purpose of these meetings is to give the community opportunities to ask questions of councillors, similar to the question time section of the council meeting, and hear updates from councillors about items of interest and concern for each specific ward area. But each meeting will be advertised on council's website with social media and the city pages, news page of Moreland Leader at least 4 weeks before the meeting, and that all councillors will be invited to attend and participate in each meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Is there a seconder to this item? Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to speak to it further, Councillor Thompson?
I understand that there was some contention when we relocated all of the meetings here to Coburg, and whilst the main reason for that is the facilities at hand, both the cameras that we have now broadcasting live to the rest of Moreland and Japan.
And
the ability to not engage with the 4 corners of our council has been of concern to particularly Councillor Bolton and others. Whilst not taking the entire council meeting to these particular locations, this is an opportunity for us to take question time, which is obviously the best part, as you can see from the audience participation at this late stage of the evening. I think that we can probably get some good value out of going to Glenroy, Fawkner and Brunswick and at least trialling it for next year.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kavanagh, would you wish to add anything further?
Just to, I suppose, make a request that if these could be entered into the councillor's diary after they're adopted tonight. Can I also ask they don't enter public holidays? Because invariably you get an alert at 6:45 in the morning telling you it's Melbourne Cup Day.
I think that's a matter for our internal processes, Councillor Kavanagh noted, and we will take that.
I know when Melbourne Cup Day is, so I'm just sure.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Any further questions? I'd like to speak, just to clarify what the resolution is doing, as Councillor Thompson has specified already. Essentially, we're scheduling our meetings for the year to come, which is the full council meetings at Coburg, however, adding these additional meetings to be able to do question-type forums in the different parts of the municipality.
So we replace the public holidays with our birthdays instead?
I think we're going off into a different matter, not before us tonight. Is there any further debate on this item? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item DCS 97/15, Sister Friendship City Guidelines.
Oh, yes, certainly. I'd like to move a procedural motion to defer this report.
In that case, I'll put that straight to a vote. All those in favour of a deferral? All those against? I declare that carried. Moving on to DCS 9815, Financial Management Report for the period ending 31st of October 2015. Do I have a mover of the report's recommendation? Councillor Rob Thompson, seconded by Councillor Lambros-Tapanos. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Thompson?
No, thank you.
Councillor Tapanos, would you
Can I
like to
say a
speak to
couple of words? Because we often allow the financial statements go without comments, and I think it's important to note what is going good and what is not. And I guess I'm just going to raise councillors to their liquidity ratios and to the diagrams that you see there, and you can see that we need to ensure that we are addressing those, because the liquidity ratio is now scheduled in the years to come to approach almost 1-for-1, and that is not an acceptable outcome. So we need to try to get that back to the rule of thumb, which is a 1 to 1.5. So I'm not sure how that occurs, but I would like to see the organisation maybe give us their comments on that in the future briefing about how we can get that liquidity ratio back up to what it should be.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Kavanagh.
Just 2 points. Number one, When I started at council, I must say the financial reports and the way they're written has improved out of sight. So I've been meaning to say that for a while when they come up, because now they used to be very difficult to read and very difficult to interpret. And secondly, regarding the liquidity ratio, it would help a lot if we weren't putting $500,000 on a councillor motion at one point. That doesn't help for liquidity, I can tell you right now. Those sort of things are things that damage our liquidity big time.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Are there any further speakers to the financial management report? He's getting to that time of night. Any further comments? Okay, in that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We're moving on to DCS 9915, 5-year financial plan, 2016-17 to 2020-21. Do I have a mover of the report's recommendations? Councillor Rob Thompson, seconded Councillor John Kavanagh. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Thompson?
I would, but I will not. I'll defer to Councillor.
Councillor Kavanagh.
I just say that with road capping coming in, etc., it's an excellent effort by officers to work out ways in which we can continue to manage financially over the next 5 years, and that's been something a subject of discussion at councillor planning days, etc. And I welcome the report and welcome the officers' efforts in doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there any further debate on this item? Okay, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Now moving on to DCS 10215, proposed land swap with Vic Roads, McBride Street, Faulkner. Do I have a mover of a proposal? Councillor Rob Thompson, moving the report's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Lenka Thompson. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Thompson?
It is reasonably well self-explanatory, something we've been briefed on a number of times.
Councillor Lenka Thompson, would you wish to speak to it?
I'd just like to highlight that it is a section of land that Vic Roads has that abuts the Merri Creek that they're offering for council, so it's in our strategic interest to take advantage of that opportunity, so I welcome this report to us.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Is there any further debate on this item? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Apologies. So we're moving on to DCI 5115, which is the Bluestone Laneways construction trials. Do I have a mover of the motion? Councillor Rob Thompson.
Is there a seconder?
Would you like to move the report's recommendation? Any amendments?
There might be amendments.
There is, I believe, an amendment, but
You're putting the original resolution?
I was going to put the original resolution. I'm putting the original resolution. So.
Is there a seconder to the original resolution as is in the report? Councillor Hopper, would you like to speak to Councillor Thompson?
I'd just like to say that, and I note that there are Bluestone committee members here, at least 20% of them. I'd just like to say that this was quite a productive year in getting these meetings together, led by our Director of Infrastructure. I think the report, and if you've had an opportunity to have a look through it, as some of you have, it's extremely well detailed. It gives a lot of background, and really we went to a lot of trouble to look at a lot of sites and undertake a lot of tests. And members of the committee got out and went and visited these sites, and I mean we spent a lot of time there. At the time, I took the mayor out to visit some of the sites, whilst not test sites, some of the sites, and she enjoyed that immensely.
I did.
Most importantly, I think as a result of this, whilst the actual the group has been disbanded officially, we're continuing, or we're proposing to continue to make reference or get together again and bring back reference to the director, and particularly on aspects of contract for future works, which I'm sure the Director of Infrastructure will be really excited about, a group of uneducated individuals telling him how to run his business. So I'm really looking forward to giving him some feedback on that. But our heart is in the right place. What we're looking for there is making sure that when the construction is undertaken by these professionals, they have an understanding of what we as a community and as a council are looking for, and that is the intention of that. And no more, no less. And I like the fact that by the end of it, in particular, the group that we were working with had made some compromises, and we weren't as staunch as perhaps we'd started, because they could understand that we have progressed to this century, and there are requirements to make some changes sometimes along the way.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor, seconding it. Apologies, Councillor Hopper.
Oh, look, I didn't have a great deal to add to Councillor Thompson's words, but I too would like to congratulate the members of the committee who have been so passionately involved in this process, and also to congratulate Councillor Rob Thompson, who's been a really strong advocate for this process. And, you know, I think that he even underestimates the amount of work that he put in on weekends and outside of hours to go out to all of the laneways, as did the members of the committee, and to see the work that was being done. He mentioned, for example, I ran into him one Saturday in Merlinston, and he said, hop in the car, I'm going to take you around the trial Bluestone Laneways sites. And then he did drop me off in the middle of a muddy section of the Bluestone Laneways site, and we ruined a particularly nice pair of shoes, but that's okay, because I got to see firsthand the wonderful work that was being done by our team to reconstruct our Bluestone Laneways, and they look fantastic, I think, and it's a real tribute to the heritage and the history and the culture of this area. And at the end of the day, that's why people choose to move to Moreland. It's not just about the change and the growth that's taking place in our municipality. It is about the history and the fact that you can still go out and find really beautiful Bluestone Laneways that remind you of what Moreland was about in the past and add a real character to our suburbs. So I'm really proud that this continues to progress. It's been a lengthy process, but it's been a considered process and it's been a detailed process, and well done to all of the people who have been part of it.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. Are there any further speakers to this item? Any amendments? Councillor Tapanos.
I also rise to support the motion and to thank everyone, as my fellow councillors did. This is a really good story. It proves that with hard work and going back and assessing and trialling, we get good outcomes. And I think we've resolved that issue about the pressure from modern day vehicles and trucks on those bluestone pitches. And that was one of the major concerns people had, whether they were able to survive that kind of additional pressure of the 21st century. And the answer is yes, and we've retained some of those key things that were in the original resolution, the history, the aesthetics of it, the permeability of the laneways, but we've been able to strengthen the surface that it's been put upon. So it's a win-win. It meets all of the requirements, and I think it goes to show once more, and I have to reiterate, well done and congratulations to everyone who's worked on it, because a solution has been found where people thought it was impossible to begin with. So we've done the hard yards, we've trialled it, we found a solution, and I look forward to this being the method that's put into our policy, and the Bluestones could continue to remain in Moreland, and that history and the aesthetics that they bring could continue to remain, whilst at the same time they are able to withstand the modern day pressures of vehicles and so forth. So I think a good result once more, and I'm really, really pleased. I think this is one of the highlights for me, seeing this report being adopted and having this issue that's dragged on now for all of this term and possibly half of the previous term finally resolved.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos, and I think it's worth noting your advocacy and continued attention to this issue as well. Councillor Bolton?
I'd just like to say something very brief, because I think the only reason we're at this point in time is because there was a rebellion in the ranks amongst residents in Moreland, because otherwise we would have concreted over the laneways. And I think it was the wonderful work of the actual residents who got together the campaign to basically push council to work out, allocate resources and thinking power to try and work out alternatives to preserving the laneways. So, I mean, I think hats off to the community, because we wouldn't even be at this point if it wasn't for that huge community outrage that galvanised and such a magnificent campaign, and has brought us all into, first of all, voting for the resolution to preserve the laneways, and then going through the whole process with the trial.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kavanagh?
Just move to speak because that's partially true, but it's. I think people forget that the council, right from the very beginning, was protecting all laneways, bluestone laneways, in heritage zones, and in fact adjoining to heritage zones. It's true for the non-heritage areas. The community advocated for that, and so the policy changed to include that. But right from the start, council was always protecting those in heritage zones.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. I'd like to move a minor amendment, which is to add an additional resolution, which is a new point 7, that Council add to the amended sections of the Rights of Way Strategy 2011 and related policies regarding the reconstruction and repair of bluestone laneways and any updated version of the Rights of Way Strategy, that reconstruction of bluestone laneway that is the main path of access to or from a public transport station will include a continuous, smooth, accessible path of travel that is DDA and AS 1428.1 compliant. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to the amendment. Or, yeah, it might be, if it's amenable to the mover and seconder.
Given the opportunity, I would be happy to, if the word bluestone will include a continuous, smooth bluestone accessible path of travel that is DDA.
Okay, that's fine. Yep, that's fine. Yep.
And I would be happy to then accept that.
Sure, I'm happy to amend that amendment to specify that it can be a bluestone.
No, not at all. Okay. There you go.
So I'll ask for a seconder to the amendment.
Oh, sorry, Megan, for a second.
Is seconder to the amendment?
What does it?
I'll get a seconder. Hold on. I'll get a seconder first to the amendment. Councillors, I'll get a seconder first to the amendment before proceeding. Councillor Lenka Thompson. I'm going to speak to the amendments to give some clarification. This is seeking to make a minor amendment to a number of the resolutions that we added when we began the trials, which was providing smooth, accessible pathways when it was the only point of access to and from potentially a residential property. So we built in a number of provisions that would provide for great accessibility if it was the only pathway. Recently, I've heard of an instance where we're talking about central pathways for public transport to and from, and if there's no accessible, smooth path, it actually then deters people from using that or prevents people from using that pathway. So I believe that we're now getting to a point where we're seeing the results of these trials. We are able to provide the smooth, accessible path. It's not asking for a totally smooth, accessible surface, but just a strip that would allow people in wheelchairs, bikes, prams, people who might have mobility issues, who have trouble traversing those uneven path surfaces. This isn't talking about a lot of laneways. It's probably one or two in the city that are the main point of access, but we do know of one or two in the city that are relevant. So it's not about all the laneways, but laneways that come up that are a significant portal for pedestrian traffic from public transport. I believe it's incumbent on us to provide an accessible pathway. Councillor Thompson, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Just to reiterate and support the amendment, because it was part of the original resolution that we passed before we started considering these trials. So, and it is, to make it DDA compliant with some of the laneways. I think it is council's right and responsibility to provide that. So I'm happy to.
Are there any speakers against the amendment?
Yeah, look, I'm still a little bit confused as to what the actual outcome of the amendment will be. I think it sort of opens up an issue of interpretation. A laneway that is the main path of access to and from a public transport station. I just don't sort of know how that is going to be defined and how that would be interpreted, particularly when we just put it in statements. I would say that if it is one or two laneways and we know which ones they are, that perhaps we mention them specifically in an additional report when the time comes to reconstruct those. But to actually include this into the policy right now just leads for more confusion, I believe, as to which ones will qualify and which ones won't. I believe the amendment is not clear in that sense, and more work probably needs to be done. I certainly don't want to see a situation where the argument is made that every bluestone laneway is a pathway to public transport, and you can say that. And we need to define this a little bit more. At the moment, I think that would be inappropriate to include this statement. If the intention is only one or two laneways, let's deal with those separately.
Thank you, Councillor Kapanos. Are there any speakers around the amendment? Councillor Thompson? Councillor Bolton, do you have your hand up first? I missed it.
Councillor Thompson might be speaking in favour. I've got sort of question.
No, I'm actually, Councillor Tapanos has opened my eyes to this particular amendment. I tend to agree the financial implications could be significant, which would obviously be a great concern. And whilst I would like it to be amended with the word bluestone as the accessible path. I think Councillor Tapanos's idea has merit there, that if we were to select those paths, for example, the one that you're currently saying now would be far greater. How you would do that, perhaps we just eliminate this. We did have somewhere in the actual body of the text the ability to be able to make technical decisions based on the roads. Whilst I haven't been able to furnish you with that, I do. It's in there in speaking with 20% of the group. So I think I would tend to not support it either.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Bolton.
I also feel that the terminology public transport station, it's not defined enough, because you could say a tram stop is a public transport station, not just a train station, and also how far, because, people come from all over the place to tram stops and train stations, and exactly how far that would, I just think it's not defined enough, so I wouldn't be prepared to support the amendment as it's currently worded, and even adding in the words bluestone I don't think resolves the issue. I do tend to think and maybe this is a separate report, if there are some particular laneways that are particularly heavily used by pedestrians to or from particular public transport hubs, then I think we should maybe have a report come back to council on that. But that might be something I might support, but at the moment it's just too open-ended, and it doesn't really give council officers much guidance about how it would apply.
If I could just clarify the questions that have been raised. The rights of way strategy is coming back to us next year because it's being amended quite significantly. So the report outlines that it's going to come to us early next year, I think February, March, which incorporates all the changes we've made to the bluestone laneways particularly. That was a trial that we've tried for the last 2 years. That policy will specify how you apply the principle. What we're asking for is the approval of a principle around accessibility. The interpretation and the discretionary power and the frameworks should be specified in the policy. So we'll be looking, what this does is give instruction to that rewrite of that policy to include something of this essence. So yes, there are various interpretations, but I believe that can be borne out in the rewriting of the policy. Just to make point as well, that the current policy that we have is being interpreted as not being able to provide a smooth, accessible pathway when it is one of the only forms of access from a main public transport thoroughfare. And so I've had a resident inquiry recently which has opened my eyes to it, and I think it was an oversight on our part when we adopted the trial methods. I don't want it to be open-ended and be blurry so that people can't have clear guidelines to apply it, but I think we do need to signal in the review of the policy that's going to come to us that we'd like some wording to this effect, that if it is the only source of access point, that it has an accessible pathway. Otherwise, and we also have to include a provision that in future we might have new public transport stations that we can't predict where they're going to be. And if we've only specified certain lanes in our policy, what happens when those new things open up and then we're not providing accessible pathways? This is an issue of rights, actually. This is the right to accessibility. Are there any speakers around the amendment? Further speakers around the amendment?
I think you've had ample.
Yep. So I'm going to put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that lost. Could I please have a division? We'll recount that vote. All those in favour was Councillor Yildiz, Lenka Thompson and myself. Now put the substantive proposal to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors.
Can we have that noted? Was that unanimous?
Yeah.
It was unanimous.
Right, we're now moving to DCI 5415, Darrell Alum Traffic and Parking Plan. Do I have a proposal?
Yeah.
Councillor Rob Thompson, seconded by Councillor Yildiz. The report's recommendations. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Thompson?
I'd just like to say that, again, a large amount of work has been put in to the particular precinct, resulting in many things that have come to council, this being one of them, and there is still more work to be done here, and I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Yildiz, do you wish to speak to this?
Look, I've received a number of phone calls from residents about this issue, very angry too, so I think it's good we've acted quite quickly on this one and not waited like long.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Any further debate on this item? No? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. Moving now to DCI 5515, Contract 402, Tender for the Construction and Planting of the Merri and Edgars Creek Wetlands. Do I have a mover of the report recommendations?
I move a procedural motion that this item be deferred.
Yep. In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of a deferral?
Can I ask a question of the...
I've got a procedural motion before us. I'm sorry. We can debate it. No, we can't debate a procedural motion. It's been put. All those in favour of deferring it?
I believe it can be.
All those against? Declare that lost. Councillor Thompson, do you have a question?
Well, I don't now.
Okay. All right, so we have...
I would like to ask a question of the Director based on the information
Okay, hold on a
that's been
second.
received.
Do I have a mover of the report's recommendation? Councillor Rob Thompson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kavanagh.
No,
Would you like to ask a question now?
No, I don't.
I would like the ability to be able to amend it, so I probably can't move it.
Are you withdrawing your moving of the report's recommendation? Okay. I'm looking for a mover for the report's recommendations. Councillor Kavanagh, a seconder. Councillor Lenka Thompson. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Kavanagh?
Not at the moment, I'll retain.
Okay. Councillor Thompson? All right. Councillor Rob Thompson, do you have a question or an
I just
amendment?
have a question of the Director and potentially based on that information I may amend it or I may not. But the opportunity to ask the Director information to this was given to us, but information only came to us very late in the proceedings. I'm assuming that obviously we're wanting to get this contract out quickly so that we can get this work undertaken, so hence the reason we're not deferring it. My question is, having assessed or looked at the assessment, we've ended up giving both parts A and B to the one company, based what looks to be very heavily weighted to price, which I'm obviously always happy about. However, had we given perhaps part A to this particular company, there was one other organisation that was clearly cheaper and appeared to have far more understanding of both the region and the works that they were doing and has worked in this particular location for part B alone. And I'm just wondering why we decided to bundle them together rather than separating them and getting the cheaper price and working with two organisations. That was purely my question.
Director of Infrastructure, would you like to respond?
Through the Mayor, first of all, the timing for the award of the contract is to enable the works to be done by the end of this financial year. So the other part of that is in having two contractors on site and trying to marry timing and works, etc., adds level of complications to managing those, pointing fingers each way at each other, that sort of thing. Having the one contractor solves those issues as well. In the tender assessment, the recommended contractor has the skills to do both Part A and Part B. We're comfortable with the recommendation that's in the report.
Thank you, Director. Satisfies your question, Councillor Thompson. Any further questions? Any further debate on this item?
I'd like to speak against.
Okay, Councillor.
I will be withholding my vote, so I'll be abstaining from voting on this item, and the reason for that is that this is a project that could cost over $700,000 and critical information to the decision-making process was not received by councillors until 5:30 this evening. I was in a board meeting from 3 p.m. until 6:30 p.m, so I've had no opportunity to consider that information, and I think it's really poor governance to be making a decision on something at this cost and of this importance with that little time to consider the information that is important to the decision-making process, which is exactly why we stopped considering general business items that hadn't been brought to us prior to midday on the day of the council meeting. This information was sought on Monday and we only received it at 5:30 today, so I can't vote on this item.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. That's noted. Councillor Thompson?
Can I speak to it? My question was only a question. Now I'd like to
Certainly you can speak to it.
I thank Councillor Hopper for her good governance there, and I support her her theory behind that. However, we must put some faith and trust within the officers. This is a civil contract that we've put out. It's being managed by our engineering department, who have far more experience than the councillors around this table on these matters. The questions were put to the director at our R&D based purely on the fact that a particular appendices had been placed there that didn't have some figures fitted into it, and we asked for some clarification. We were given some clarification. I appreciate that it was very late in the piece, but I feel comfortable having read through that, having asked the director here in council chambers, in front of camera, in front of the large studio audience, that those have been answered, and whilst we're talking a $20,000 difference one way or the other, so I'm not as concerned. And again, it came down to timing, and again, it comes down to contractors on site, so I'm happy with the result.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Is there any further debate on this item? In that case, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
I'd like my abstention noted.
And note Councillor Hopper's abstention. I'd like to ask for an extension of the meeting time by half an hour to 10:40. Councillor Kavanagh, seconded. Councillor Thompson. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. I will move on now to item DCI 5615, contract 410T General Tree Services. Is there a mover for this item? For DCI 5615, the contract.
Page 368.
Oh, I'm happy
Yep, Councillor Rob Thompson, seconded by Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to speak to it?
Again, given the opportunity to speak to the director extensively on this, a very large and wide group of companies have been awarded many of the opportunities to undertake work for us throughout the year. I look forward to seeing many of their trucks and vehicles across the municipality undertaking work, and many of them there I know and have worked with in the past, so I look forward to seeing them working well for us.
Thank you. Councillor Yildiz, do you have anything further to add? Is there any further debate on this item? So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. Thank you. Now move on to Social Development, DSD 3315, commemoration of centenary of 1916 and 17 conscription referendums.
I've got an alternative resolution.
Councillor Bolton?
Which isn't massively different, which I sent around earlier. It's not massively different, and I can point out the differences. I think Lydia's got it.
Yep, that's the amended resolution.
On screen. So basically, do you want me to read it out? Or
yes,
Council resolved to commemorate the centenary of the 1916 and 1917 conscription referendums and anti-conscription and anti-war campaigns in Moreland through. Actually, I've just duplicated. I realise that first paragraph through. So. Point 1, which is unchanged, a major display at the Brunswick Library in partnership with the Brunswick Coburg 1916-1917 Anti-Conscription Commemoration Committee, BCACC. Point 2, which is only slightly changed, a series of talks on the World War I conscription debates at Moreland's libraries and possibly at other venues, featuring speakers including former Deputy Prime Minister Tim Fischer, international artist, human rights advocate, pacifist and winner of the Courage of Conscience Award Bill Kelly, local resident and BACC member Emeritus Professor Michael Hamill-Green and other relevant speakers. An additional point 3 and renumbering subsequent points, the 2016 Maurice Blackburn oration to have an anti-conscription theme, as Maurice Blackburn played a key role in the anti-conscription and anti-war campaigns during World War I. So points 4, 5 and 6 unchanged, a partnership with the Brunswick High School and teacher Pamela Duncan involving students using the library's local history archives and resources and culminating in the reenactment of a mock trial or anti-conscription debate potentially at the St Ambrose Hall, a walking tour of sites in Brunswick connected with the anti-conscription debates in partnership with BCACC and possibly also the Brunswick High School. Should that be Brunswick Secondary College?
Yes.
Yeah, that was in something in the original resolution. Point 6, local histories and research of the period being placed on the library's local history online database, Wiki Northia. Point 7, a commemorative artwork And then point 8 has been amended. So that's amended to read, installing a plaque commemorating former Prime Minister John Curtin's role in the anti-conscription campaign in a prominent place. Plaques on the homes of John Curtin and Frank Anstey, which is still standing, and a plaque in Pentridge commemorating the anti-conscription activists, including Adela Pankhurst and John Curtin, who are imprisoned in Pentridge Prison. And lastly, lobbying Metro Trains and Vic Track for a plaque commemorating former Labor parliamentarian Frank Anstey's role in the anti-conscription campaign at Anstey Station.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kavanagh seconding it. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Bolton?
I would like to speak to it. I mean, I think it's great that Council so far, and hopefully Council will continue to support this, tonight. This is quite a really important occasion in Australia's history and our local history in terms of Brunswick and Coburg. I believe Australia was the only country which had a referendum on the First World War, and this referendum, twice, in 1916 and 1917, people voted against the war, and that's despite every single establishment figure of the day, including the media, the government, etc., totally supporting conscription. And it also has important democratic rights consequences in terms of more recent times. So I think it is very important for us to commemorate this. And also, there's so many important figures, some who are not so well known. For instance, I think it was unearthed perhaps by our librarians or others they consulted about the role of the principal of the, I think it was a Brunswick Girls' School, who was also incarcerated in Pentridge Prison for her role in opposing conscription and opposing the First World War. And certainly Maurice Blackburn played a really, really key role. And I think Frank Anstey, I gather, played a key role in persuading senators in the parliament to not just let Billy Hughes send the troops off and just introduce conscription. So I think there's quite a lot of history to unearth as part of this project, and I think it's really vital that it be commemorated. There's very little official discussion about this period of our history, and I think it is something that we definitely need to maintain. And I gather there's a lot of enthusiasm amongst some of the teachers, at least at Brunswick Secondary College, for this whole project.
Thank you,
And also just one last thing to mention is that Neil Cole, former minister in the Labor government, is apparently he's also a playwright. He's planning to write a play about this period of history for I don't know how long the time frame is, but I think he's hoping to have it ready for around the time of the anniversary of the anti-conscription referendum.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to add something? One second, after the speakers for...
Just to say that I think that Councillor Bolton's amendments have improved the resolution. Correct, Maurice Blackburn certainly had a very important role. In fact, was elected in 1916 and lost his seat in 1917, so he gave up his seat basically because he was an anti-conscription campaigner. So I admire him for that. Certainly people in this area, particularly in the south of the municipality, obviously many played an important role. Would like to see some recognition of the Catholic Church in there because they were the main people against it. Archbishop Mannix was the main campaigner. I know you said the government were all in support of it, but Archbishop Mannix was up there front and centre with Billy Hughes. In fact, Billy Hughes called the Catholics during the two referendums the enemy within because the Catholics were the ones that were so violently against. I think it's something like estimates about 85% of the Catholics voted against voters against conscription. It was very much Protestant versus Catholic, unfortunately, in that time. But anyway, there's one other point I was going to say. And Neil Cole, I'm really pleased to hear about because he was very nice to me. I used to work in the service station in West Melbourne and he used to live across the road. He's a fantastic guy and I used to have some fantastic chats with him every night. He's a great fella and he's gone through some difficult times too, so I'm really pleased to hear that he's writing that. And there's one other thing. What's the last thing you had down there? Oh, Frank Anstey. Yeah, Frank Anstey was actually, if you read John Curtin, the biography by David Day by Curtin, almost the first half of the book is devoted towards Frank Anstey and his influence on Curtin, and was Deputy Prime Minister at one stage in 1912. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Bolton for speaking so eloquently to that motion. Is there further discussion? Councillor Thompson had a question first.
Just wanted to know whether any pre-work had been done with the Morris Blackburn oration as far as themes or speakers had been already
I might get a response from the Director of Social Development first around that point, yes.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. We've got some early thinking about themes at this point and possible speakers.
This won't interfere with it?
Beg pardon?
This won't interfere with it, or this is your thinking?
Well, there's a view that perhaps this is going to be covered extensively through all those different items, and in contrast to some of the other contemporary issues, there may be stronger candidates to be the main speakers at the Blackburn oration. There are topics around family violence that are contemporary. There are topics around social inclusion. There are topics around human rights that are all very contemporary, and some of the names being tossed around are Gillian Triggs, Chief Justice Warren of the Supreme Court, Marcia Neve, who's the head of the Royal Commission into Family Violence. So nobody's been lined up yet, of course, but those are some of the early thinking, and the plan is to bring that to Council early next year with some suggestions.
Thank you very much, Director. That's very useful. Councillor Tapanos.
Okay. I was going to propose an additional dot point, but I do agree with the Director there. And perhaps point 3, if it's acceptable to the mover, that perhaps it's it be considered amongst other, be considered. So not actually making the decision tonight, but be considered as part of the Morris Blackburn oration. I'm not sure if that's acceptable.
That's an amendment that's been proposed. Is that satisfactory to the mover and seconder? That point 3 be worded to be considered? That the theme be considered as part of the...
don't want to accept that, but I can explain why, or unless you'd like me to explain why now.
So just one thing, if that's not amenable to the mover at this stage, would you like to move it as an amendment, Councillor Tapanos, at this stage?
Yes, I think I would.
Okay,
Yeah.
could I have a seconder to that, Councillor Rob Thompson? So now we can enter debate and you can speak to why you weren't supportive of it. So I'll just get Councillor Tapanos to speak to that change.
I'm not going to speak to it. I think the Director outlined a number of contemporary issues, and I think when you're really determining the Morris Blackburn oration, it would be appropriate to actually think about who the guest speaker will be. It is that is a big consideration. Who is able to participate in the oration and who is able to speak on a contemporary social justice issue of our time. So if we're able to get fantastic speakers on another topic, I think that should be part of the consideration, and not necessarily locking in this topic. As much as I support and I'm very pleased to see this being presented tonight, I think that we would really like to see who the speakers are and make our decision based on the availability of speakers.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Thompson, do you want to add to that?
Look, we asked the Director came back to us with a number of initial thoughts and suggestions of where they're moving, none of which seem to speak to the topic that we were looking at here. I don't want to restrict their planning moving forward. If given the opportunity to consider and something came out of the woodworks, all well and good and fantastic, and happy to have that. But as Councillor Tapanos has indicated, sometimes we are governed by the Speaker. And I know last year we had a late change. I think we had a late change last year. And I just think we don't want to dictate to the Director at this point which direction we want to go with the speech.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Are there any speakers against the amendment? Councillor Bolton.
I've got a minute, sorry.
I mean, it's not the end of the earth if the amendment gets voted up. I would like to urge people to consider that, it doesn't have to be a purely historical debate. I mean, we've got probably perhaps even more wars going on now than we've ever had. War is still an issue. We don't have to imprison this topic into just a purely historical thing, because Maurice Blackburn was an anti-war campaigner as well as an anti-conscription campaigner, and there is still debate in the federal parliament about the question of should the government have the right to send troops to war without a vote of parliament? And I think that's a really important issue. Wars are creating refugees. That's what we're seeing with Syria, where the whole country is being depopulated. I think one of the people who the committee had in mind was Barry Jones as a possibility. And of course, the suggestions raised by the director are all very worthy people. But if the amendment goes down, if the amendment gets voted up, I think the Maurice Blackburn oration, if it is on a different topic to this, should make note of Maurice Blackburn's role around this issue, because this is the year of the anniversary of the anti-conscription referendum, and Australia was the only country which had a vote on this. And there are a number of countries around the world that are trying to pull the politicians into line to say, at the very least, the Parliament should have a right to have a vote. And this was a popular vote. It wasn't just the parliamentarians voting, it was a popular vote, which is quite unique in the world.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I'm now going to put the amendment to the vote. So this is the amendment to reword point 3. All those in favour? All those against? I declare the amendment carried. So now it forms part of the substantive motion. Councillor Tapanos, you wish to move another amendment?
I do have a couple of amendments as well. I wanted to know that we did some time...
Councillor Tapanos, can you please put the amendments on the table?
The amendment read that... can we go back up to point about Frank Anstey?
That's
Councillor
point
Tapanos, do you want a minute to write those up? Because I might take further debate on... I just want to close the debate and see if it's the last one.
I'll come back to my last amendment. Just give us a second.
Councillor Tapanos, I'm going to give you a minute to write up your amendments, please.
So an additional dot point be inserted. That council start the process of consulting the community about the possibility of naming the new public space at Wilson Avenue, John Curtin Place, that a report be presented to council in the future.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Hopper, do you want to speak to it?
I do.
Please be brief. It's very late.
I've been to the last couple of years. I had the opportunity to travel to Perth in the NWA and to see how many places, roads, freeways, parks actually named after John Curtin, who I consider to be one of our greatest, well, the greatest Prime Minister Australia has had. And I often am told, and in fact I was told this fact by Kim Beazley when he was the leader of the Labor Party and on a visit to Moreland. It's a few years ago, obviously, when he was leader, that John Curtin was born in Victoria, of course, and he lived and grew up in Brunswick. So it was a fact I didn't know at the time, and the fact that I've been thinking ever since, well, why don't we commemorate John Curtin in our city a little bit more? And I believe the best way to do that is, of course, putting up plaques and having forums, and we've done that in the past, and we should do it again. But I believe naming a public area, and perhaps a park or a road, would be more than adequate. Well, would be more than we should. We should consider that. And this new space in Wilson Avenue is a fantastic space that's just been created. It doesn't really have a name, and I think it should be a bit of a place that people can refer to. John Curtin lived in and around that precinct. So I think it's a perfect match. And if we're commemorating his contribution to the anti-conscription movement, I think the timing is also perfect to consult the community about this possibility. And I like to see it included in this motion because I would like that symbolism with the anti-conscription movement as well.
Thank you, Councillor Tapnos. Councillor Hopper, would you like to add anything
Oh,
further?
no, nothing to add to that. Just that I know that this has been an interest of Councillor Tapnos's for some time. So it's wonderful to see this progress, and I hope that it's successful.
Are you speaking of the amendment? Councillor Tapnos'
yes.
amendment to his amendment. So we're just talking about the amendment at this stage, his additional point.
That was what I was talking
Okay,
about.
sorry. I thought the whole project, you phrased it like the whole project, which in support. Any other speakers against the amendment, for the amendment? For the amendment, Councillor Kavanagh?
Yeah, can I just speak for the amendment? Councillor Tapanos is exactly right. Prime Minister Curtin was a family hero of mine, and in fact, fortunately, he was a very good friend of my grandparents and had a lot to do with them. In fact, my mum's earliest memories, there's a photo of my auntie being carried around by John Curtin with my auntie in one arm and mum at the other side. Unfortunately, I'm not sure what's happened to that photo, but anyway, he used to be over at the house a lot, apparently. Yes, and he lived very close to there, and he actually had a room in the Phoenix Hotel for many, many years, upstairs in the Phoenix Hotel, which is almost at that point. So that would be fantastic, and he was at school at St Ambrose's, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Any other speakers on the amendment? I'd like to put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. I'm now going to return to the
I'd like to
substantive
call
part of the
division
motion.
on that amendment.
Voted against it.
We call division. All those in favour? So
Both Greens, all those in favour.
it was only Councillor Thompson, Rob Thompson, Lenka Thompson and myself who were against it. All the others were for it. Yeah. We now return to the substantive motion. I'm going to put that to the vote because I believe that we've had substantive debate. Do you want to write a reply?
I want to respond to.
Yes, you can close the debate.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's great that people seem so supportive of it. Just in reply to one of the issues that Councillor Kavanagh raised, I think through this whole project and through this next 2 years, I think there's a need to look at the role of a number of different people and groups that played a big role in the whole campaign. The role of Catholics, and Archbishop Mannix is one. The role of the Irish, but also probably very underlooked at is the role of women and women's groups. It seems that women's groups played a really, really key role, and Adela Pankhurst was the most famous, I think, of the anti-conscriptionists when she arrived in Australia, and then she was imprisoned for her work. The role of the trade unions coming out so strongly, so quickly, the role of socialists. So there's a range of groups that played a really key role that, you know, that we want to unpick. And then their thoughts about some sort of exhibition at the Noel Coonahan Gallery. We haven't investigated that yet, but apparently they're booked up all of next year, so they book out very early. But I think there would be a lot of local artists who'd be interested in combination with reproducing some of the posters of the time.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. And we're now going to put the substantive motion, which includes the amendment, which is now part of the main motion, to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Note. We'll move on now to DD 10315, Plan Melbourne Refresh Draft Council Submission. Is there Councillor Davidson would like to move it, like the report recommendations? Yep. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to speak to Councillor Davidson?
Yep, I'd just like to move the recommendations as read on page 199. So Plan Melbourne, when it initially came out, lacked detail and major issues that were considered important to Moreland. The refreshed discussion paper allows for Moreland to enter submissions in relation to key issues such as housing supply, diversity, affordability, environmental sustainability and climate change. I'd like to thank the officers and the director for the huge amount of careful thought and innovative ideas that have gone into these submissions and the careful charts that have answered each proposal. Three of the main submissions were asking the state government to have regard to infrastructure capacity and to protect urban character over meeting housing targets. Another one was calling on the statewide guidelines on apartment development and objecting to the removal of third-party participation. and we're submitting that there is no need for the Minister to become the responsible authority for social housing projects. So, it was a very well thought out submission paper, and I'd like to provide it to Council for their support.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. That was really well summarised. Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to add anything further? Is there any further comment or debate on that item? I'd like to add, maybe then in closing as well, that I really commend the submission. It's really thoroughly drafted, and all the points that Councillor Davidson highlighted make it a really, really strong submission. And it's really important that we add our voice to some of the strategic planning decisions made by the state government. I particularly liked the concept of optimising rather than maximising, in terms of infill developments in inner city areas. And it's a really interesting concept to actually get better development outcomes, just not the most development outcomes you can possibly get from an area. And I think that's going to be a really important consideration as we face more population pressure, and for the inner city particularly to take on more of that population growth. So I really commend some of the really conceptual work that's gone into it. Nothing further to add, Councillor Davidson? I didn't want to take your right of reply there. I'd like to put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried.
Prior to moving to the next item of DED, I just wondered whether any councillors might need to declare a conflict in light of the owners/operators of this property providing sponsorship to organisations that they might be associated with.
So we're talking about DED 10415, Amendment C160 to Moreland Road.
They may not feel required to, but I just thought they might
bringing
want
that to awareness, yes. DED 10415, 1 to 9 Moreland Road, the Amendment C160, the rezoning. Whether there's any close association.
Do you think that 425?
You want me to declare
councillors, I'm not going to ask for. Hold on, councillor, I'm not going to ask for the debate.
I do know them, but I don't have any vested interest.
Councillor, can I ask that you might want to seek some? Do you want to seek some advice, Councillor Yildiz?
Sure.
So I'm just going to pause for 15 seconds while we do that.
Think of it. Sorry.
We'll just pause for 15 seconds while Councillor Yildiz gets some advice about whether he wants to declare a conflict.
I just wanted to make sure he was aware of it.
I'm going to move the attachment, but it's got to move.
Now that we're waiting,
there's no debate. We're just pausing for 10 to 15 seconds. It's not an excuse to talk.
I'm happy to declare.
Councillor Yildiz?
Declare a conflict, and I'll explain the reasons why.
You just have to give a summary. You don't have to go into the detail. If it's just a.
Well, look, they support the charity that I lead up.
Okay, so business association.
But I have had a relationship with those guys way before the charity.
So Councillor Yildiz, you're declaring a conflict based on a business association.
Potential conflict.
Yeah, it's just a declaration.
And I really do want to clarify, I wasn't putting you on the spot. I just want to make sure you didn't find yourself in a.
Look,
so
Councillor Yildiz, I'm sorry. We're not going to get into. It's a worthy conversation, but we need to keep going. So Councillor Yildiz, you're going to leave the room while this item gets discussed. We will call you back in as soon as it's over. So we're moving to DD 10415, the amendment, a business association. We're moving to 1 to 9 Moreland Road, a request for rezoning. Is there a mover for the report recommendations or an alternative? Councillor Rob Thompson, is there a seconder? Councillor Hopper, would you like to speak to it? Councillor Hopper, would you like to speak to it? No? Any further speakers for or against?
can I just clarify the heights on this side?
Certainly.
So yeah, I think it's a question to the director.
Yes, the question to the director, clarify the heights. It's 6, isn't it? It's 4 to 6.
The particular interest to the Mayor will be that the heights for this one are 6 stories.
And that's discretionary?
Yes.
Yep.
Any further questions or comments?
To be consistent, I'd like to perhaps propose that the DDO on this site be amended so that is a mandatory 6.
Okay.
That is.
So you might want to add a point to point 1 to seek the authorisation with an amendment to the DDO as attached to reflect a 6-storey mandatory height.
Yes. Yes, that would be correct. Yep.
Are councillors clear about the amendment that's being proposed?
Yes.
Yes. Is that satisfactory to the mover and seconder?
It is the seconder.
Councillor Thompson, are you happy with that amendment to the mandatory height provisions as opposed to discretionary?
Maximum of 6.
Yeah, mandatory maximum.
Inconsistent.
Inconsistent.
I
Councillor
think
Thompson?
it's consistent. We have mandatory.
Yes, yes.
Okay, Councillor Thompson. So that is now, that forms part of the substantive amendment. Is there any further debate on this item? I'll just make a quick comment then, just to note the amount of work that's gone in. I know there's been years and years of work. We've had 2 significant rezonings prepared tonight, and there's been close negotiation with the proponents from that site and council officers, and I actually think the resolution is a really nice yield from those discussions. So just want to commend the work that's gone into it, because these are really significant decisions that we're making. All right, on that note, I'd like to put it to vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried.
Grab it.
Pardon?
Grab Councillor Yildiz.
Oh, yes. We'll just get Councillor Yildiz back into the chamber.
I move a motion to extend the meeting by a further half an hour. It's 10:30.
Yep. 10:40 we extended to.
Okay, no worries.
So
Sorry.
we've got a couple of minutes.
I was
But,
enthusiastic.
well, we might use this opportunity then to extend till 11 o'clock. Councillor is happy to take, could I have a mover for that proposal? Councillor Hopper, seconded by Councillor Kavanagh. All those in favour to extend the meeting till 11? All those against? I declare that carried. Okay, we're moving on to DOD 115, Council Action Plan and Advocacy Program 2015 to 16, the first quarter. Do I have a mover for the report's recommendations? Council Advocacy Plan. Councillor Lincoln Thompson, seconded. Councillor Rob Thompson, would you like to speak to it, Councillor Thompson?
Just to note that in this first quarter performance that we've achieved 100% of our advocacy program, and also, that 94% of our council action plan is on target, so it's a great effort in our first quarter.
Thank you. Councillor R. Thompson, would you like to add anything? No? Any further discussion on this item? No? Okay, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. We now move on to urgent business. We've covered all our officer reports today. Councillors, could I please have a motion to admit item DCI 5715, contract 415T, Merri-bek Children's Centre refurbishment and extension as urgent business?
So moved.
Councillor Kavanagh, seconded. Councillor Lincoln Thompson. I don't think anybody wants to add debate to that. We're going to come back to this. This is just to admit it, isn't it? So I'd like to, all those in favour of admitting it as urgent business? All those against? I declare that carried. So now we're considering DCI 5715, which is the Merri-bek Children's Centre refurbishment. Do I have a mover for the...
Can I move the recommendation on page 3 of the urgent business report?
Certainly. Is there a seconder? Councillor Rob Thompson. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Kavanagh?
Just to say it's another rollout. We've unfortunately over the last few years we've had a few major improvements to our kindergartens, preschool centres, and this is another one. It's in the public, isn't it? Yes. Okay, so the contract is worth a total of $1,667,690. So it's a major, even though it's late at night, etc. That's a major investment in preschools in Moore.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Thompson, would you like to add anything further?
Just that there was some contention as this went through planning, and it was given some serious thought and consultation, and I think the result was quite good in the end, so I'm happy to support.
Thank you. Any further debate on this item? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. That brings us to the end of the meeting, the public section of the meeting. So we're going to ask for a motion to close the meeting to the public now as we move into the confidential section. Could I have a motion to close the meeting? Councillor Davidson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kavanagh. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you, members of the gallery who've stuck with us for that long. That's a really valiant effort.